app called Coup, which has become popular now. So what is this issue all about? Why did this sudden surge happen? Why did Coup suddenly become popular? Because of the government moving to Coup in a big way, many of the ministries and many of the ministers and all. If you don't follow this instruction, you can be jailed for up to 7 years. That is the penalty that is available in this section. Hi friends, welcome. In the last 3 weeks, there has been so much of issue that has been discussed about Government of India versus Twitter, and because of that, an app called Coup, which has become popular now. So what is this issue all about? I wanted to make a video on that. Now the issue between Government of India and Twitter, we'll come to it towards the end of this video, but before this, on this Coup app. So Twitter is a microblogging site. You know, all of us may have Twitter accounts. It is used by almost all celebrities, all leading politicians, ministers, governments, all of them have their own Twitter handle because it's instant communication which can reach people. And this Twitter was founded way back in 2006. Twitter is the sound in English for the sound made by sparrow, and that is why you find that the logo of Twitter is a blue colored background and a sparrow, which is the logo of Twitter. Now competition to this, there have been various apps which have been developed in the past also across the world. For example, in US, there is an app called Parler, which was quite famous, especially during the previous president's term. In China, there is no Facebook, there is no Google, there is no WhatsApp, and there is no Twitter also. The Chinese equivalent of Twitter is what is called as Weibo, and it is pretty popular in that country, and that is what they use as a microblogging site. So this Coup app, right, and the word Coup is the sound made by cuckoo, right, koel ki coo, as they say in Hindi. So that is the basis, and that is why yellow cuckoo is the logo for this Coup app, just like a blue colored sparrow in a blue background is the logo for Twitter. So this app was not developed overnight, guys. It was not that on January 31st, February 1st, there was a tussle between Government of India and Twitter. So overnight they made this app. No, it was not like that. This app was developed in March 2020. The purpose of this app is to popularize microblogging in regional languages. In fact, they offer it in 6 languages now: Tamil, Malayalam, Telugu, Hindi, English and Kannada, if I am not wrong, and they want to take it up to other languages in India also going forward. So the aim of this app, which was created almost 11 months back, it is a totally Indian made app, made in India app by entrepreneurs based out of Bangalore, was to provide an option, a better option for the native users. And in fact, in the Atmanirbharta challenge, which is the self-reliant India slogan, which has been made popular after the corona pandemic by the Government of India, there was an app challenge which was a competition, and this Coup app was selected as the winner of that app in August 2020. But because of this tussle towards the end of January, early February between Government of India and Twitter, this app started having traction. You know, some of the ministries like Ministry of Information and Technology started having a Coup handle, lot of ministers started having it, celebrities started using it. So because of this, it has gained traction. So in fact, it has reached almost 30 lakh users now, 3 million, over 1 million users in the last just 10 days. So which is a good thing, right? Wherever there is a competition, it's always good, isn't it? And India has had good indigenously developed apps. For example, we have our own Ola, which, while Uber is famous throughout the world, we have our own Ola in our country. We have our own Swiggy and Zomato, which is equivalent of Uber Eats, which is more popular across the world. Even before Amazon could come in a big way to India, Flipkart was an indigenously developed app. So was Snapdeal, which is still existing. Of course, Flipkart has now been bought over by Walmart, and Snapdeal majority stake is with SoftBank of Japan, if I am not wrong, but still they were indigenously developed apps. So similarly, if there is an indigenously developed app which can more the competition, better the service, so it is a good thing to have in a market place. So good wishes to the Coup company for further success for their app. But having said that, right, a lot of the people who have joined it is because of Atmanirbharta and nationalism and the struggle or the tussle between Government of India and Twitter. So such things can make an initial surge, but that is not going to sustain it, isn't it? Ultimately, it will depend on user friendliness, how friendly it is to the user, how many people start using it, because it's a microblogging site which is used for mass communication. So, unless there are people who follow you on that handle, on Koo handle, many people start using this Koo app, it is not going to gain as much traction just because of the initial search, but hopefully it becomes more user friendly and many people start using it, and it's always too good to have competition. But now, why did this sudden surge happen? Why did Koo suddenly become popular? Because of the government moving to Koo in a big way, many of the ministries and many of the ministers and all. That happened because of the challenge between Government of India and Twitter. Now, there have been farm protests which have been happening for more than 100 days. So, there is a separate video on farm laws that I have made long back. You can go and watch it for my views on the farm laws. There are issues surrounding it for which there are protests happening, but there have also been negotiations which have been happening between the Government of India and the protesters. So, we will not get into that discussion now, which is a separate debate in itself. But on January 26th, very unfortunately, some miscreants created a lot of violence in what has otherwise been a very peaceful protest for more than 100 days. And so, the government should punish the perpetrators of that violence, no doubt about that, but the protesting farmers' demands and the discussion should also happen so that there is a mutually agreeable conclusion. So, we will keep that aside for the time being in this video. But having said that, now there is an act called Information Technology Act, which was enacted in the year 2000. Now, under this act, there is a section called section 69A. Now, what does this section say? If the central government or any person authorized on that behalf feels that any communication in a computer platform, so Twitter is a platform, right? It's called an intermediary. Twitter is an intermediary. Facebook is an intermediary. Google is an intermediary. YouTube is an intermediary. All these computer platforms, if there is any content which the government feels will affect the sovereignty and integrity of India, unity of India, defense of India, friendly relations with foreign states, public order, all those things which can also be placed as a restriction on free speech. So, if the government feels that any content can be harmful and can create any problem in these areas, the government can ask the intermediary, in this case Twitter is the intermediary, to either delete a particular tweet or block an entire handle. Now, there is a mechanism which has been laid down in the rules. Who is the deciding authority for this? It is the Information Technology Secretary, but he does not do it on his own immediately. There is something called as a blocking committee. So, a notice has to be issued to the intermediary. The intermediary has to come and give his replies and clarifications. Now, though the reasons are recorded in writing for the reason to ask the intermediary to block a particular handle, the government need not show those reasons and get objections to it from the intermediary, but the intermediary can be asked to give more reasons and clarifications depending on what is discussed in the committee, what is shown to him by the blocking committee. And after this, the Information Technology Secretary will be the final authority who will decide whether to block it or he can decide not to block it. So, there is a due process which has to be followed here, a reasonable procedure. But in the same rules, there is one exception which says in emergency situations, the government can block or ask the intermediary to block it immediately. And then within 48 hours, this hearing has to happen. This blocking committee deliberation has to happen. So, the government felt that there are 257 handles, and it included international magazines like Caravan, it included local citizens who are journalists, some Kisan Morcha which was supporting the farm agitation. So, they felt that these have content which can create public order issue, which can affect the unity of India. So, it issued an order to the Twitter, which is the intermediary, to block entirely, not just delete the tweets, to block these 257 Twitter accounts. Now, this was served on Twitter on January 31st. As I told you, in emergency situations, they can serve the notice first, but the hearing by the blocking committee has to happen within 48 hours. So, Twitter did not act on it from January 31st afternoon till February 1st afternoon. But February 1st evening, this blocking committee meeting happened, and just before this meeting, Twitter blocked these 257 handles. But in the blocking committee meeting, what was the deliberation that happened? We do not know. It is not in public domain. But after coming out of that meeting, Twitter again unblocked it. Now, if you don't follow this instruction, you can be jailed for up to 7 years. That is the penalty that is available in this section. Now, looking at it from a very, very legal perspective, any company, any person who does business in the country has to abide by the laws of the land. And so, if there is any issue with any order being passed by the government, it can be challenged in the court, and that is the due process that has to be followed by everybody, including Twitter. So, I think it is important that our legal system, right, which has its own set of checks and balances, is appropriately followed by everyone. But having said that, I feel personally that there has to be more transparency over this application of section 69A itself. Now, why do I say that? Because there is a similar section which was declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court in 2015. There is a section called 66A. Now, 69A deals with the intermediary, whereas 66A deals with any individual person, a citizen or even a foreigner within the country. Now, what did that section 66A say? It said that if any person posts anything on a computer platform, right? I have a Twitter account, if I post something, I have a Facebook account, if I post something, and if the government feels that it is harmful, it can create hatred, it can lead to violence, it is meant to mislead or deceive the people who are seeing it, then the government can imprison that person for a period of 3 years. But this section was struck down by the Supreme Court as unconstitutional because it said this is unreasonable. There is a fundamental right under Article 19(1)(a), which is freedom of speech and expression. There can be reasonable restrictions which can be placed on it, but those restrictions should be reasonable. It cannot be unreasonable. This section is unreasonable. Now, why am I linking these two in my limited wisdom? Because while 69A, the instruction from the government can be to an intermediary, the accounts getting blocked could be that of a citizen. So, it is indirectly linked to section 66A in my personal view, and hence there has to be more transparency. Why is it being asked to be removed? What is the objection? What is the response from the intermediary? And that should be put in public domain because it involves the protection of fundamental rights of the citizens across the country. Having said that, it is important that any decision of the government, if it is not acceptable to any corporation, it is something which, to operate in the country, it should be based on the laws of the land and it can be legally challenged. We have recourse to that, but the state is always a powerful entity, right? Now, we are comparing the government and Twitter. Twitter itself is also very powerful in its own way across the world. But if it comes to government versus a citizen, the citizen's rights should be protected against a powerful state, and that is the essence of a democratic country run by a constitution. So, there should be more transparency in the application of section 69A, and hopefully this will be resolved by following the due process. And as I told you again, good wishes to the Coup app for more and more success. Thanks for watching this. I will see you again with another video next week.